Here today from the Akronist to have a conversation with Dan Minnich, Director of Media Relations of the University of Akron. Dan, it is my pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you, Pat.
I looked up some things about you, Dan, and your career trajectory is very interesting. From anchor, producer, reporter, and now Director of Media Relations. Talk to me about that trajectory and how you got to where you are now.
Wow. It's been, the literal roller coaster ride, to tell you the truth. Started out in journalism, and I loved journalism. It's a great field, and I guess as it's shown, because I work with journalists now, I like it. I still like the news business. I believe in the news business. Had a great run in news. Loved being out there. I worked in radio and television. Started out in the Cleveland market, but then worked in some surrounding markets in surrounding states before coming back home here when my first child was on the way. Decided to get into a position where back then the pager wouldn't go off in the middle of the night, on weekends, on holidays, on days off, where I'd have to pull all three shifts and just I wanted something a little more stable,
Okay.
and something where I could live a more normal life and actually be around to help the kids and see the kids grow up.
I see. So talk to me about your Executive Director of External Affairs at the Cleveland Municipal School System.
It was an interesting time, and back then it was interesting for a lot of reasons. One is that the media was a lot different back then. The media, for instance, back when I started at the Cleveland schools, and this would have been in the late 90s, we had two separate reporters from the Plain Dealer back then assigned to do nothing but cover the schools. And oftentimes we would have multiple crews from each of the TV stations covering the school district. Now, unfortunately, they weren't covering good news in general. There was a lot of especially the first couple of years I was there was a lot of news that you would not consider good. The superintendent or CEO at that time, though, did get things not only calmed down, but I believe really moved the district forward. And we were able to make a lot of progress on media relations as well as in so many other areas. But those first couple of years there, an incredible education in crisis communications. I used to joke with my boss at the time. I said, I have my master's in crisis communications now, because basically that's what it was, probably 90+% of the time. I went to Cuyahoga Community College from the Cleveland schools, and the ratio was reversed,
All right.
which was very nice.
Okay.
It was a nice change. Crisis, in my line of work, crisis is something that, you never like to see a crisis, but crisis gets the adrenaline moving once in a while. On the other side of things, you like to promote positive news as well. And at Tri-C I was able to promote a lot of positive things. The college was growing at that time, had a new campus actually that went up, a lot of new buildings, new students, new programs, a lot of good things there happening there at the college. And I loved higher education. But from there I got caught up in a budget crunch. And ended up in the private sector for the first time in my life, first time in my career, down in Canton at Timken,
Yes.
the Timken company, and my first foray into the corporate world, which was fascinating because not only did I need to learn a whole different way of doing things in the corporate setting, but after I was there about a year, we found out that there was a activist investor who ended up wanting to break up the company. And he succeeded. He broke the company up, or forced the breakup of the company, I should say, into a steel company and into a bearings company. So a company that was more than 100 years old split. And the process of that split, again, a 100-plus-year-old company, 20,000 employees in around 30 countries around the world, trying to split those two apart was a fascinating experience. I wouldn't want to go through it again.
All right.
But it was a very educational experience and a fascinating experience. At the end of that process, or just about when it was finished, it was about to go into effect, I'd been missing higher education. Something about higher education and about the fact that you're doing something for the future of the community. It's always appealed to me. K-12 education was the same way too. And in fact, one of my majors in college was English education, so I've always had that interest. But I wanted to get back, and fortunately, I found a position here. I was selected for a position here, and I love it. I love the people here. I love the university. Everything about it's been great.
I'm glad to hear that. So, media relations, public relations, can you juxtapose the two of them and give me the difference?
Well, media relations is a subset of public relations. Media relations is one piece of it. Media relations is you're primarily working with the news media. So you're working with the radio reporters, TV reporters, newspaper reporters, reporters at websites these days. Whereas public relations it runs the whole gamut. In both cases, reputation management is kind of, at the end of the day, that's really what you're doing, enhancing the reputation of your employer, maintaining it in the face of a crisis. But on the media relations side, you're really dealing pretty solely with those reporters and with the media, as opposed to public relations. You're dealing with your internal audiences. So here at the university, employees, staff, faculty, students, as well as external parents, legislators, city politicians, city residents. So public relations takes all of that in and communicates in a variety of ways, whereas on the media side, really, you're getting messages out through interviews, through statements, and trying to get those on TV, on the radio, and the newspaper.
And that is your specialization?
That's my specialty, and throughout my career, I've had a special interest in it because, again, I love journalism. I love working with journalists to this day, and I've always kind of gravitated towards that. I've had much broader responsibilities in some other places, but this is really, I guess, in my wheelhouse more than anything else.
Bishop Johnson, our senior pastor at the House of the Lord, once said, relationships are everything. When it comes to your line of work, do you agree with that statement?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it works both ways. The relationships that I have with reporters, producers, with assignment editors have been built up over a period of years in many cases. And I hopefully delivered. Hopefully in their eyes I've delivered. When I've told them we're going to have a story here, they dedicate a reporter to that story. The reporter comes out and they find exactly what I told them was going to be there. They find out that, yeah, this is a pretty good story. And that ends up either on the news that night or in the newspaper the next day, or actually these days it gets posted on the website, whether it's the newspaper or wherever, within a few hours. Hopefully it's there. But that relationship piece also works coming back this way. Those assignment editors and reporters and editors also understand that, you know what, Dan helped us out on that last crisis. It was not a good story for the university or for wherever Dan was working. It wasn't a good story, but Dan still helped us out. Now he wants us to cover this story, which is, okay, it's a good story, it's not really hard news. We've got these other two stories that are kind of the same, value. But you know what, because Dan helped us out and gave us what we thought we were going to get, we're gonna cover that. So that relationship works both ways, as any relationship does. It's a two-way street. And if someone isn't going to help me out when I help them out, I'm going to remember that. The same way that they're going to remember that if I don't help them out, even if it's a negative story, if I try to pitch them on a positive story the following week or month, they're, hey, you didn't help me when I needed it.
I hear you. Well, Catherine Boyd, someone you worked with in the past, makes the following comment. Dan Minnich is a true pro. He's earned the media's respect the old-fashioned way. He earned it. Over the years, countless reporters and editors have relied on Dan to give them what they need, quick response time and correct and detailed information. How do you feel when you hear that?
Well, Catherine's a sweetheart, first of all. I said that before, and she truly is. But that's exactly what I've tried to be and what I've tried to do. And Catherine I worked with at Cuyahoga Community College, and she also is a pro, also had a very fascinating career. And to come from her, it's a tremendous compliment, and I'm humbled by that compliment.
Well, Dan, in our remaining moments, what would you like the viewers of the Akronist to know about either what you do, what legacy you want to leave, tell us something that you want to leave us with about Dan Minnich that maybe we don't know.
Wow. Well, you know what? I try to keep, believe it or not, in this business, I still try to keep a low profile.
Okay.
Occasionally, you'll see my name with a story, but generally we try to put the president, in the case of the university, we try to put the subject matter experts, is what we call these people. If somebody calls, hey, I'm doing a story on the stock market, we try to find them, for instance, a professor of finance, as opposed to talking with that professor and getting up to speed. Okay, I'll talk with you about it, and us being quoted. We want them to be quoted. We want to highlight the expertise of that professor and of the institution. And we want to help, really we want to help tell the story of this place and all the organizations I've worked for. The goal is to tell their story. And in this world with the media as it is, and you know, I still love the media, but there are downsides to the media as are to anything. I hope my legacy, or if I'm showing anything to anyone, I have a student assistant here, I hope if there's anything that she and other student assistants have taken away from working with me, it's that, you know what, you try to go out there, you try to tell your side of the story, the organization side of the story, and you're honest about it, you're upfront about it, and then if it's a bad story, hopefully it's a one-day story, and hopefully those good stories come a lot more often than the bad stories.
Dan Minnich, I appreciate you taking the time to tell your story. You make Akron a greater place. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Pat.